If you were to describe your experience working with her, how'd you describe it? What was it like?
I mean, I think Jess is awesome. I think you feel when you're talking to her, you feel like you're in good hands in particular. Like, I don't know what it's like working with Jess versus other like Ayurvedic practitioners. I don't know if there were like other approaches to my condition. I don't know if there were like um other sorts of medicines or other like diagnoses, right? Like I only have one person that like yeah, like Jess is sort of like the only person I work, and I also haven't really worked with nutritionists before, right? Like I haven't really worked with like one-on-one like I like lifestyle coach, and which I think just sort of is also along with like an Ayurvedic doctor, right? Like, but I felt like very secure when working with her. Like it seemed like she would know what's going on, and I felt like taken care of in that way. Like I think that's the best way to experience it, right? Like I felt confident that she knew what she was doing. Um, I think Jess projects that as well in that like she offers explanations for things. I think that the way that Jess like took my case is like knowing that I'm not very steeped in the Ayurvedic tradition or don't understand it super well, and knows that Jess knows that I'm coming from more like Western scientific background, like explained a lot of stuff like from that angle, right? Like she wasn't going into the intricacies of doshas and stuff with me. And I actually had to once ask her, how would you characterize all of this within an Ayurvedic framing? And I thought that was really interesting that she was able to communicate across these different worlds or meet me where I was at in terms of what I wanted to understand and how I would understand things. I thought I was also really impressed by that, right? In a lot of ways, when I talk with Jess, it doesn't feel like I'm talking to an Ayurvedic doctor. It just seems like I'm talking to like a nutritionist that really understands the human body well. And then she'll give me herbal, concoctions to take. And that's the Ayurvedic part, right? But yeah, even there, like she'll explain how these things are working and what they're good for. And so, yeah, that's how I would describe working with Jess, right? You feel comfortable and confident in her when you're talking to her, and she explains things at the level that you want things to be explained at. And it's just very clear she knows what she's doing.
Curious if we took a step back and you were to describe what you were coming into this with, like what your condition was like, and what you tried before, and kind of why you decided to go in this direction.
So the condition was called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, and the primary symptom is fat malabsorption. So it's just very clear that as you eat fats, they aren't absorbed by your body properly. There are times when it was just very clear that I wasn't digesting food that I was eating, right? Or like things would trigger me, and I had lots of like IBS like symptoms, just lots of issues around digestion, but also like a lot of other weird things. So, like, lots of, like, low energy last year, also poor mood as well. I mean, all these things are definitely related, right? Earlier in the year, I had, like, memory issues and stuff that, like, seemed to get a bit better, but, like, yeah, and even like an eye infection that I'd gotten that took like a very long time for it to go away. And so I just didn't feel like my body was working well, is the way that I would explain it, right? So what I was coming in with was like just it doesn't seem like my digestive system is working properly. Oh, and then also just on like gastritis sort of like sensation. So like acidity, stuff like that. And so all of that together was just like my digestive system wasn't working properly, and I had gone to multiple doctors at this point, and so a gastroenterologist, who then referred me to the world expert on pancreatic insufficiency that works at Stanford. I've now seen multiple doctors, from gastroenterologists to rheumatologists to like different primary doctors. I've gotten basically like every test under the sun that is like related to these sorts of things, and like almost all of them have come back normal except for this one about pancreatic insufficiency, right? But the doctors can't really explain why that's happening because I have none of the risk factors for that condition. And like in the imaging that they did, the pancreas looks pretty healthy and normal. The pancreatic enzymes, which are like a sign of pancreatic damage, are also within normal range. And so it's just like really weird that this is happening. And the only thing that seems to have triggered a lot of this was like a case of like mono basically earlier in the year, and that can just like ravage the body in all of these different ways that are really hard to reason about and understand. And so like doctors are really good at dealing with pancreatic failure when it's a problem, or like pancreatic issues, when it's a problem with the pancreatic organ, but not when it's a problem of like signaling to the pancreas to perform certain duties, or like all these complicated pathways that like the different organ systems take together, right, to like produce some intended output. Like that is really hard to reason about and a really hard sort of process to act on. And so I basically was going to see this expert in this condition, right? And he has a procedure with the pancreas that he specialized in, performs a procedure on me, and basically says that like actually there isn't that much that he saw there that could be contributing to the issues that I'm having, and that like he doesn't really know if there's much that he and like they can do for me. Like he was sort of just like, this is like really, really bad IBS is like the only way that I can explain it. Um, and like I think that was like the moment where I was like, yeah, maybe this like Ayurveda thing like could could be a place for me to turn. And I think it was more from desperation, right? It wasn't sort of like this is like, you know, like Western medicine is BS and doesn't know what it's doing, and there's this other thing that probably does. Like I was like, if I'm gonna like go down the role with like some BS science where like people are trying random stuff to me, like I would rather do that with someone that I can talk to like once a week, you know? Like um and so like that's sort of like the situation that I was in with my own body. Like I was like, I'm down to just trial and error my way out of this, you know? And so that was, you know, like I think one thing. But I guess the other thing is like I've heard that Ayurveda is really, really good at digestive conditions. And this isn't like, I mean, this kind of makes a lot of sense, right? Like,
What did, when you came in to see Jess, how did she diagnose and communicate what was going on to you? And then what was the tactical details of the plan that you guys went through?
so it's complicated. I mean, I think originally she was like there might be a lack of like proper flow of bile here or something like that. Like I think this idea of like ama is like clogging sort of like the fluids of the body inside, and that making it difficult to actually digest your food. Very early on she showed sort of this suspicion and like framed sort of like the medicines and stuff in terms of like producing like I think the flow of like bodily like liquids more effectively, if I'm remembering correctly, right? The condition that she ended up diagnosing me with in Ayurvedic language is like kapha ama, which is like too much kapha and a lot of ama that's being produced, or like is in the body that we need to get rid of. I remember when she was saying this and I was like, yeah, seems believable. Like I'm not really sure. Like maybe, maybe not, right? Like also like all the things that she has prescribed to me are things that support like the essential organs of digestion, right? From the stomach to the liver to the intestines, so on and so forth. And so I'll be honest, like I still don't know if that was the like central issue that was being solved, or whether there are like other things that were going on as well that also ended up getting solved. It's actually something I might want to discuss with her in my like next call, now that she's also had more experience and time with me. But this was sort of her initial approach, and we ended up doing like a month of just like getting your diet very much in order. And I also think that probably did really good preparatory work for the formulations when I started taking them.
Where do you feel like where did you feel like you started to see different results? Like did the food display, all the changes in diet display one result, and then the formulation started to create different results? How's that progression?
Yeah. I actually, this is like the funny, I think the food helped, but not as much, like, as I would have thought. Honestly, 3 to 4 days into taking, like, the Hingu Vichadi that she'd given me and the Amrutotram, like, together, like, that is when I experienced, like, the most, like, difference in my symptoms, and, like, shockingly so, like, I did not expect it. I remember very distinctly in that week feeling like, "Oh, this actually feels like a turning point," right? That was, like, week 4 or 5. We did 3 weeks of, like, preparing. You can even, yeah, I mean, I think we did maybe like, yeah, week 4, I think. Yeah. And so I think those formulations worked really, really quickly, which honestly I was pretty surprised about, because as I understand it, these formulations usually take time and they like act over time, and like it's not like it's rare to see like instantly like good results like this. And so I, you know, I do wonder whether like there was some like acute vulnerability that these like formulations were like attacking directly, or like something like that, right? Like I am also, my case is also super weird, and so like also my path of like the solution through Ayurveda might also be like a little like, weird and one-off in some ways. But yeah, I remember that being very distinct. But also like a lot of other good things, right? Like in that first month, I started eating a diet that was like probably like 3 times as much fiber as like I was eating beforehand. And now like I can eat a lot more fiber than I ever could in my life, like feel comfortable, right? Like don't get gassy, don't get bloated, like feel very comfortable digesting all that fiber. And like it's very clear that like, the next day, like that was like my body can handle it. And so that is also something that I like, which is sort of interesting, right? Like, just a solution to like this IBF style issue was like eat a high FODMAPs diet with like lots of beans, right? It wasn't just like cut all these things out, and like hope that like if you don't give anything that can ferment this like maybe weird bacterial composition in your intestines because like everything is awry, like you will feel better, right? Like it's really like you need this stuff to actually like feed the good bacteria and like make things like, like and help your intestines like digest your food, and like we'll try to like actually get at like the root of the problem rather than just like managing symptoms. And that was sort of interesting because I feel like if I hadn't gone to Just, I probably would have just like met a nutritionist and like done like a really low FODMAP diet or something, just managing my symptoms, and like that probably that could do more harm, like long term than better, so. Mhm.
What are your symptoms like now? Like, do you feel like your condition is like resolved, getting to being resolved? Where is it at?
Yeah. So I'm starting like on it. So before this Barcelona trip, like I had a week where like I felt better digestive wise in terms of feeling bloated after meals to gastritis sensation to even the stool formation to like, all those sorts of things. Like I felt better than I've had felt in a very long time. I mean, years for sure. That's actually one point that I think is important to flag, which is to me, all of these issues happened on February 29th, 2023, when I had mono that flared up and then afterwards was left with just a really weird gastrointestinal system. But it's also now very clear to me that I've had issues with this stuff for years, right? And I can remember having issues with this stuff for years. And so even though this feels like I came for an acute thing, I also came for a long-standing whole body problem that I've had for a very long time, right? That I'm working on, resolving. And so that period before the Barcelona trip is like, and so yeah, for context, I took a trip to Barcelona last week, right? So before then, like, um, I felt some of the best I felt in a very long time. And this is also like my skin looked much healthier than normal, right? Like my memory also felt better, like all these sorts of things. And then the Barcelona trip where like this was like the first real test, right? Where I was actually just kind of eating whatever. Like, okay, I'm now gonna let myself not be restrained. So I'll eat whatever. My sleep schedules were all super wonky. Like there were some nights where I was sleeping like 3 hours a night and stuff. And that week, my symptoms definitely acted up, but nowhere near how bad they were before, right? Like it was actually very clear, oh, I'm digesting everything I'm eating, right? Like it's actually no issues with that, right? But like I'm just like gassier than normal. And I'm eating a bunch of stuff that I don't normally eat, right? Like it's not sleeping much, right? Like the way that Justin put it is like actually, Varun, like it sounds like your reaction to the trip is like in a pretty normal range for like what most people going abroad to like Europe or something for a week, switching time zones and not sleeping well, like would experience, right? Like it was nothing out of the ordinary. And like actually, like as of today, like coming back from the trip, like I'm starting to feel like I'm getting back to like normal, right? Like that week before. And so yeah, like that's if that answers at least your question in the near term. But yeah, that I would say like my symptoms are um much like I can digest my food well, man. Like it feels more normal than it ever did. Yeah, so yeah.
That's awesome. I love to hear that it feels better than it did for years before. That's awesome. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, totally.
How do you feel like this has shifted your perspective on health as a whole?
Yeah, I mean the one thing is like I am so it's funny because also working with Jess has meant I sleep more than I used to. I sleep earlier and wake up earlier than I used to. I like make most of my own meals, and they're like actually like pretty complicated meals with like lots of different spices and vegetables and things like that, right? Like I eat much healthier. I have a lot fewer like cravings for like fried and sugary foods. I think it kind of like speaks for itself, right? Like I've just like taking my health a lot more seriously in this like very much like whole body way. Um and like even if I don't take formulations in the future, like all these other things are just like really good like pulls, like structures to have, in your life. And so yeah, that's sort of that's sort of how I would think about it. Like I just feel like I've sort of learned how to live in a healthier way.